Types of force. What is force? A force is a push or pull upon an object resulting from the object's interaction with another object. Whenever there is an interaction between two objects, there is a force upon each of the objects. When the interaction ceases, the two objects no longer experience the force. Forces only exist as a result of an interaction. In 1687, Isaac Newton published his three laws of motion. His three laws explained how the concepts of force and motion work. Newton's first law of motion states, a body in motion tends to remain in motion. A body at rest tends to remain at rest unless acted on by an outside force. Newton's second law of motion states that a force acting on an object will change its velocity by changing either its speed or its direction or both. The third law is probably the best known of Newton's law. It states that for every force in action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Force is classified into two types, contact force and non-contact force. Under contact force, there are four types: applied force, normal force, tension force, and friction force. On the other hand, non-contact force has gravity force. Contact forces are those types of forces that result when the two interacting objects are perceived to be physically contacting each other. Examples of contact forces includes frictional forces, tensional forces, normal forces, air resistance forces, and applied force. An applied force is a force that is applied to one object by a person or another object. If a person is pushing a desk across the room, then there is an applied force acting upon the object. The applied force is the force exerted on the desk by the person. An applied force is an interaction of one object on another that causes the second object to accelerate or change velocity or direction. The force can be a push, pull, or drag. The resulting direction of an object depends on the relative direction of the force on the object. The object will accelerate as long as the force is being applied. So this is our own example of an applied force, a boy pushing a washing machine. As you can observe, the force that is applied to the washing machine is a push force, the most common form of force. And when the boy pushes the washing machine, it causes the thing to accelerate and change position. The force applied on a stationary object will move that object in the direction of the force unless there is a large enough resistive force holding it back. The results of the direction that the force is applied on an object vary with the motion of the object. Normal force. The normal force is the support force exerted upon an object that is in contact with another stable object. For example, if a book is resting upon a surface, then the surface is exerting an upward force upon the book in order to support the weight of the book. On occasions, a normal force is exerted horizontally between two objects that are in contact with each other. For instance, if a person leans against a wall, the wall pushes horizontally on the person. The normal force is the force that the surfaces exert to prevent solid objects from passing through each other. Normal force is a contact force. If two surfaces are not in contact, they can't exert a normal force on each other. For example, the surfaces of a table and a box cannot exert normal force on each other if they are not in contact. Here's our own example for normal force. A plant container resting on a surface. The plant container resting on a surface has the force of gravity pulling it toward the earth. However, when two surfaces are in contact, they exert a normal force on each other, perpendicular to the contacting surfaces. These normal forces will be as large as necessary to prevent the surfaces from penetrating each other. Can you have a negative normal force? Well, there are two normal forces acting. There is the downward force the box or the container exerts on the surface, and the upward force that the surface exerts on the container. The two forces are equal and opposite, as Newton's third law tells us, so one will be positive and one will be negative. Tension force. The tension force is the force that is transmitted through a string, rope, cable, or wire when it is pulled tight by forces acting from opposite ends. The tension force is directed along the length of the wire and pulls equally on the objects on the opposite ends of the wire. Tension force is defined as the force that is transmitted through a rope, string, wire, when pulled by forces acting upon opposite sides. The tension force is directed over the length of the wire and pulls energy equally on the bodies at the ends. Here is our example of tension force. A boy holding a pull wire with a power bank on its end. Friction force. The friction force is the force exerted by a surface as an object moves across it or makes an effort to move across it. There are at least two types of friction force, sliding and static friction. Though it is not always the case, the friction force often opposes the motion of an object. For example, if a book slides across the surface of a desk, then the desk exerts a friction force in the opposite direction of its motion. Friction results from the two surfaces being pressed together closely, causing intermolecular attractive forces between molecules of the different surfaces. As such, friction depends upon the nature of the two surfaces and upon the degree to which they are pressed together. Friction is a force that happens when objects rub against one another. It is a force that opposes motion between any surfaces that are in contact. Friction can be defined as the force that resists the relative motion of solid surfaces, fluids, or elements that collide or slide against each other. Here's our example of frictional force. The motion of writing using a pencil pen on a paper surface. Non-contact force. A non-contact force is a force applied to an object by another body that is not in direct contact with it. Non-contact forces come into play when objects do not have physical contact between them or when a force is applied without any interaction. Gravity force. The force of gravity is the force with which the Earth, Moon, or other massively large object attracts another object towards itself. By definition, this is the weight of the object. All objects upon Earth experience a force of gravity that is directed downward towards the center of the Earth. The gravitational force between a mass and the Earth is the object's weight. Let me show you our own example of gravitational force. Here is a crumpled paper falling down on the surface due to gravity.
Audio Jungle.